Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. Free speech. Not that long ago, when everyone claimed to be in favor of free speech. How long ago was it? 20, 25 years ago, when defense of free speech began to be, controversial. Because it turned out that there are certain types of speech that are not free speech. Hate speech is not free speech. What's hate speech? Well, again, it's one of those terms like racism and systemic racism and white supremacy that's not really defined, and for a good reason. George Orwell wrote a famous essay called Politics in the English Language, published, I believe, in 1947. Which he decried the widespread use of the word fascism. And he explained that fascism in 1947 pretty much meant something that the writer disagreed with. And of course, we have Antifa now because everyone is against fascism. And well, what's fascism anyway? Well, fascism died in 1945, but apparently it's been living underground and is getting stronger and stronger and stronger and is an ever greater threat to everything that we hold dear. So I suppose the Harper's letter on justice and open debate, published yesterday, can be seen as a brave step, I suppose, a brave stand in favor of free speech, except it's a little more complicated than that. And this letter bomb exploded almost as soon as it was published, with very amusing results. The essay, or the letter itself, is exceedingly meretricious. We believe in free speech, but we're not, one of those guys. Let me read the first paragraph. Our cultural institutions are facing a moment of trial. Powerful protests for racial and social justice are leading to overdue demands for police reform, along with wider calls for greater equality and inclusion across our society, not least in higher education, journalism, philanthropy, and the arts. But this needed reckoning alert, has also intensified a new set of moral attitudes and political commitments that tend to weaken our norms of open debate and toleration of differences in favor of ideological conformity. As we applaud the first development, we also raise our voices against the second. The forces of illiberalism are gaining strength throughout the world and have a powerful ally in Donald Trump, who represents a real threat to democracy. But resistance must not be allowed to harden into its own brand of dogma or coercion, which right-wing demagogues are already exploiting. The democratic inclusion we want can be achieved only if we speak out against the intolerant climate that has set in on all sides. Okay, we have a hint here of this new meme, which is a week old, is that Donald Trump is actually cancel culture. Who exactly did Donald Trump cancel? Rosie O'Donnell? No, she's still around. She doesn't seem to have been much affected. Megyn Kelly? Well, Megyn Kelly parlayed Trump's attacks on her and her attacks on Trump into a very rich, I believe a $25 million contract with NBC News, which came a cropper after she asked what was so horrible about blackface. You see, the liberals here, the liberals are under threat from the right. This is the planted axiom in the Harper's letter. Actually, liberalism is under threat from the left, and liberalism, as I've been saying for some time, it's over, it's finished, it's dead. It's the left. The left has been attacking liberalism for decades now, and the liberals thought that they just keep their head down and we'll let everyone know just how much we hate Donald Trump and before him Oh, I don't know, John McCain or Mitt Romney, George W. Bush, these far right wingers, the demagogues. And it hasn't helped them. They're increasing calls for the liberals to mount the scaffold, and being good little liberals, I suspect that most of them will. Let's see. Reading more from this manifesto. The free exchange of information and ideas, the lifeblood of a liberal society, is daily becoming more constricted, while we have come to expect this on the radical right, which is just so powerful. Just so powerful in America. Who is being canceled? Oh, Stefan Molyneux is being canceled. He's on the radical right. Apparently, E. Michael Jones canceled. Diamond and Silk. I suppose if you're going to look at a balance of power here, I suppose you could look at it this way. Who is canceling whom? Katokoga, as Lenin said, and we know who has the whip hand. The stifling atmosphere will ultimately harm the most vital causes of our time. The restriction of debate, whether by a repressive government, you mean like Trump's, or an intolerant society, invariably hurts those who lack power and makes everyone less capable of democratic participation. The way to defeat bad ideas is by exposure, argument, and persuasion, not by trying to silence or wish them away. We refuse any false choice between justice and freedom, which cannot exist without each other. As writers, we need a culture that leaves us room for experimentation, risk-taking, and even mistakes. We need to preserve the possibility of good faith disagreement without dire professional consequences. If we won't defend the very thing on which our work depends, we shouldn't expect the public or the state to defend it for us. Well, as Jacob Siegel pointed out in the tablet a couple of weeks ago, we've moved beyond this point, far beyond this point. And the liberals, they're all applauding Black Lives Matter, which is a Black supremacist organization. They've all been talking about peaceful protesters, that somehow arson and destruction broke out at a peaceful protest. But the main problem here, of course, is that the police are murdering people in the streets. They're murdering protesters. It's remarkable. All of the pictures I've seen of the police standing by and just watching, gazing at the destruction. I went over the list of people, many of whom were familiar to me, many of whom were not. But I noticed that the list of the signatories is heavily Jewish, which tells me that the Jews are beginning to worry that they're about to get it in the neck, because they occupy a position of privilege in America, and this has not gone unnoticed by Black Lives Matter and its allies. And in fact, Black Lives Matter is openly anti-Israel for a start. They're not bothering to hide that anymore. We have Ice Cube, the noted philosopher, telling Jake Tapper, a Jewish fellow, to watch his mouth. Let's see, Martin Amis, Ann Applebaum, Margaret Atwood, John Banville, Louis Begley. Jennifer Finney Boylan, we'll get to her again in a minute. David Brooks, Ian Bruma, Noam Chomsky, there's a big name for them. Roger Cohen, who has spent, the last 20, 25 years actually arguing against a democracy in places like Hungary. How dare they make the wrong choice? This isn't real democracy. Caitlin Flanagan, David Frum, more on him in a moment. Francis Fukuyama, Todd Gitlin, that old pink, Malcolm Gladwell, Jonathan Haidt, Jeet Heer, who's no longer with the New Republic, now with the Nation, Michael Ignatieff, who is running a Hungarian university from Vienna, now. The joke against Michael Ignatieff was that he was just visiting Canada, and when he lost the election, it turned out that the jibe was true because he fled the country, which he had managed to avoid living in for most of his adult life. Gary Kasparov, Nicholas Leman, Mark Leela, Damon Linker, Dahlia Lithwick, Kathy Young and Emily Yoffe, Matthew Iglesias, more on him in a minute. Barry Weiss, Gary Wills, Michael Walzer, Zephyr Teachout. Gloria Steinem, the old feminist. She signed. Jessie Single. J.K. Rowling, more on her in a moment. Jonathan Rauch. Katha Pollitt, Letty Cotton Pograbin, is one of the founders of Ms. Magazine. Steven Pinker, more on him in a minute. Deirdre McCloskey. She is a transsexual, is she not? And more on transsexualism in this regard in a minute. So the New York Times was on all over this story immediately. Artists and writers warn of an intolerant climate. Reaction is swift. An open letter published by Harper, signed by luminaries including Margaret Atwood and Wynton Marsalis, argued for openness to opposing views. The debate began immediately. Salman Rushdie, he was there, was he? Okay, all right. The killing of George Floyd has brought an intense amount of racial, wait for it, reckoning in the United States. I should point out that the authors are Jennifer Schussler and Elizabeth Harris. As protests spread across the country, they've been accompanied by open letters calling for and promising change at white-dominated institutions across the arts and academia. The letter, which was published by Harper's and will also appear in several leading international publications, surfaces a debate that has been going on privately in newsrooms, universities, and publishing houses that have been navigating demands for diversity and inclusion, while also asking which demands and the social media dynamics that propel them go too far. And on social media, the reaction was swift, with some heaping ridicule on the letter's signatories for thin-skinnedness, privilege, and as one person put it, fear of loss of relevance. Of course, I did not sign the letter when I was asked 9 days ago. Richard Kim, the enterprise director of HuffPost, said on Twitter, because I could see in 90 seconds that it was fatuous, self-important drivel that would only troll the people it allegedly was trying to reach. And I said as much. Joel D. Anderson, whoever he might be, said, in a world with real problems, who even knows what this is actually about? Yeah, I think he knows. I think Joel D. Anderson knows very well what this is all about. But it turns out that there's only one problem in the world now, and that is Black Lives Matter. And the resistance, such as it is, to BLM overrunning our civilization. Let's see, Mr. Williams, that would be Thomas Chatterton Williams, a columnist for Harper's and contributing writer for the New York Times Magazine, a black man, incidentally, said that initially there was concern over timing. Quote, we didn't want to be seen as reacting to the protests we believe are in response to egregious abuses by the police. But for some time, there's been a mood all of us have been quite concerned with. There's been more than a mood, Mr. Williams. He said that there wasn't one particular incident that provoked the letter, but he did cite several recent ones, including the resignation of more than half the board of the National Book Critics Circle over its statement supporting Black Lives Matter, a similar blow-up at the Poetry Foundation, and the case of David Shore, a data analyst at a consulting firm who was fired after he tweeted about academic research linking looting and vandalism by protesters to Richard Nixon's 1968 electoral victory. Such incidents, Williams said, both fueled and echoed what he called the far greater and more dangerous illiberalism of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the canceller-in-chief, but the correction of Trump's abuses cannot become an overcorrection that stifles the principles we believe in. See, they're trying too hard. Again, who has Donald Trump canceled? Donald Trump is actually a liberal. He is a civic, a nationalist. He is arguably America's most pro-gay president. But no, you've got to get in the pro forma swipe at Donald Trump. We're not just a bunch of old white guys sitting around writing this letter, Williams said. It also includes plenty of black thinkers, Muslim thinkers, Jewish thinkers. They're not white. People who are trans and gay, old and young, right wing and left wing. Yeah, a lot of right wingers in that list. You see, Thomas Jefferson Williams believes that if he makes the pro forma statement that he is not an old white guy, that the mob is not going to come from him, for him. Sadly mistaken. Sadly mistaken. There was particularly strong blowback over the inclusion of J.K. Rowling, who has come under fierce criticism over a series of comments widely seen as anti-transgender. J.K. Rowling tweeted, "I was very proud to sign this letter in defense of a foundational principle of a liberal society, open debate, and freedom of thought and speech." Emily Vanderwoof, formerly Todd Vanderwoof, a critic at large at Vox who was transgender, posted on Twitter a letter she said she had sent to her editors criticizing the facts that the Vox writer Matthew Iglesias had signed the letter, which she said was also signed by several prominent anti-trans voices, but noted that she was not calling for Iglesias to be fired or reprimanded. No, of course not. Doing so would only solidify in his own mind the belief that he is being martyred. Yeah. Someone's in the process of being martyred. Yeah, that's exactly the sort of person that would claim to being martyred. I know of this Emily, former Todd Vanderwoof fellow or person. He is a pisser de copy whose TV critiques I suffered through for several years back when I read the Onion AV Club. Amid the intense criticism, some signatories appeared to back away from the letter. On Tuesday evening, the historian Carrie with a Y, Kay Greenidge, tweeted, "I do not endorse this Harper's letter," and said she was in touch with the magazine about a retraction. Julia Malucci, a spokeswoman for Harper, said the magazine had fact-checked all signatures and that Dr. Greenidge had signed off. But she said that the magazine is respectfully removing her name. Another person who signed, who spoke on the condition of anonymity. Yeah, let's sign a free speech letter and then hide under anonymity, because such is your devotion to free speech. She said that she did not know who all the other signatories were when she agreed to participate, and if she had, she may not have signed. She also said the letter, which was also about internet shaming, among other things, was now being used to shame people on the internet. Who's being shamed? The people who are being shamed are the people who are attempting to cancel those who signed the letter. Let's see, who is this? Mr. Betts. I didn't come across his name before. In any event, he's the director of the Million Books Project, said, "I'm rolling with people I wouldn't normally be in a room with, but you need to concede that what's in the letter is worthy of some thought." He said that as someone who spent more than 8 years in prison for carjacking committed when he was a teenager, he was given pause by what he called the unforgiving nature of the current moment. It's antithetical to my notion of how we need to deal with problems in society. Okay. This just gets better and better. Coburn at The Spectator US wants to know why Vox is so keen on canceling people. Why is it so keen on censorship? He says that he's long enough in the tooth to remember when it was fairly uncontroversial to defend the free exchange of information and ideas. Not anymore in 2020. That is edgy stuff. Inevitably, as water boils over heat, the letter has triggered precisely the sort of hectoring media response and dire consequences which the writers were decrying. Progressive Twitter exploded in apoplexy at this provocative assault on the right to tell people to shut up. The Vox writer Matthew Iglesias got it worst of all. He was rash enough to sign the letter and received a volley of angry replies, including from, as Coburn calls him, or her, sorry, not me, the amusingly named Emily Vanderwoof. She penned a hilarious, obnoxious letter to her editors, which she generously excerpted on social media. As someone who is sometimes a woman, Coburn would like to take their hat off to Vanderwoof for her absolute masterclass in passive aggression. She should be promoted, perhaps given Iglesias' job, if only to solidify in her own mind what Vox stands for. Other Vox staffers piled in against Iglesias. Coburn can't help but wonder if Vox should rename itself Censura or Restrictio, since censorship is what most of the staff seem to be most interested in doing. Where would you rather work, Harper's, which published the letter, or Vox, which abhors it? I suppose that depends on what kind of person you are. The letter caused conniptions elsewhere among a certain sort of blue-check progressive. It became instantly fashionable to accuse the letter writers of being predictable and, drumroll, fragile. Karen Ataya, and you might remember her, she's the one who said last week that white women should be lucky for how little they're being persecuted right now, because they deserve much, much worse. In any event, she said that too many folks are afraid of losing power, exhibiting symptoms of status anxiety because too many have refused to keep up with the times. Coddling intellectual laziness and harmful rhetoric is no longer a moral virtue. You see the outright Stalinism here, that after Stalin had seized power, or he had, let's say, he had made himself the head of the Soviet Union, dispatching his rivals, and instituted collectivization with its millions of victims and mass arrests, mass murder, mass terror. The line of the Stalinists was that they were the beleaguered folk, because it was all the left deviationists and the right deviationists and the wreckers and the saboteurs who were carrying all before them. Okay, so this just, everyone seems to had an opinion on this, and of course many of the people who signed the letter, as noted, are backing away from it. I mentioned Dr. Carrie Greenidge, Carrie with an I. Author and trans activist Jennifer Finney Boylan, who used to be called James, also expressed regret for having signed the letter. In both the case of Boylan and Vanderwoof, these were men who were married to women, and then they transitioned, and they're still married to women, saying that their marriage has benefited from this. Wow, pretty sophisticated stuff. I did not know who else had signed that letter, Boylan tweeted. I thought I was endorsing a well-meaning, if vague, message against internet shaming. Did she actually read the letter? It's pretty straightforward. I did know Chomsky, Steinem, and Atwood were in, and I thought good company. The consequences are mine to bear. I am so sorry. So very sorry. Back to... As a trans woman who very much values her position at Vox and the support the publication has given her through the emotional and physical turmoil of transition, I was deeply saddened to see Matt Iglesias' signature on the Harper's weekly letter, said Emily Vanderwoof. Matt is, of course, entitled to his own opinion, and I know he is a more nuanced thinker than signing the letter would suggest. He has never been anything but kind to me and has often supported my work publicly, all of which I'm extremely grateful for. But the letter, signed as it is by several prominent anti-trans voices and containing as many dog whistles towards anti-trans positions as it does, ideally would not have been signed by anybody at Vox, much less one of our most prominent people at our publication. She told the editors that Iglesias' signature makes me feel less safe at Vox, and claimed that it made her job slightly more difficult because readers will equate my positions with his. I don't want Matt to be reprimanded or fired or even asked to submit an apology. Not yet, not yet. But I do want to make clear that those beliefs cost him nothing. They did. They did shortly thereafter. Let's see. What else? Oh, and there's a picture of Emily Vanderwolf looking at some ceremony or other. Yeah. Vanderwolf was a little-known internet writer, and then became trans, and then became much, much better known. I'm sure this is absolutely a coincidence, and I want to reject completely out of hand the outrageous suggestion that trans people do what they do because they are attention seekers. That is hate speech and must be condemned unequivocally. Let's see. Others at Vox voiced their support for Vanderwolf. Caitlin, K-A-T-E-L-Y-N, Burns, a political reporter at the site. I wonder how much of a correlation is there between people whose Christian names are misspelt by accident or for artistic reasons and radical or idiotic political thought. I would think that the Venn diagram there, pretty big. Anyway, she argued that the letter's text was aimed at transgender critics. Yes, it's all about us. It's only ever all about us. Vox engagement editor, whatever that means, Nisha Chittal, wrote that the letter was from a bunch of mostly white people, boo, with platforms at prestigious media outlets complaining that minorities are silencing them. Former Vox video producer Carlos Meza, who is not in any way involved with cancel culture, and that would just be an outrageous suggestion to make, so I will not make it. Carlos Meza noted disapprovingly that he was not surprised about Iglesias' signature on the letter. So, tweet wars. Oh, David Frum. Yeah, David Frum signed the letter. Richard Hanania commented, while David Frum signed the letter against cancel culture, he consistently contributes to the mobbing of middle and lower class people that he considers his cultural enemies. He wants elites to have their congenial debate club while stamping out those who are beneath him. Yes, and I noted that David Frum is an old hand at cancel culture. Going back to the 90s, he attempted to cancel Pat Buchanan, who is still very much among us. And as long ago as 2003, in National Review, he infamously tried to cancel Pat Buchanan, Bob Novak, Llewellyn Rockwell, Sam Francis, Thomas Fleming, Scott McConnell, Justin Raimondo, Joe Sobran, Charlie Reese, Jude Winiski, Eric Margolis, and Tacky. Disingenuous neocon. Disingenuous, but plenty of chutzpah. So he's a Canadian who goes to the United States and then decides that he is the arbiter of what constitutes a patriotism. Too funny. Oh, Robert Reich, the tiny, perfect globalist, wrote, I decline to sign the Harper's letter because Trumpism, racism, xenophobia, and sexism have had such free reign and baleful influence in recent years that we should honor and respect the expressions of anger and heartache finally being heard. The expressions of anger and heartache finally being heard. Yes, they were absolutely quiet in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the zeros, and the tens. It's just we never heard from these people about their anger and their heartache. He forgot to mention exhaustion because they're constantly claiming to be exhausted despite their, how would I put it, Stakhanovite work ethic. or cancel ethic in any way. Someone called Patty Yummy or Yumi Cottrell, who apparently has been published in McSweeney's and seems to have a near shaved head. Oh, Editions Grasset. Ooh, Tony. She tweeted, there's a writer from the Harper's Letter who was a regular at the cafe I used to work at. His daily order included an extra large cup of all foam, and if it was too wet, his wife would come up and ask me to remake it because it needed to be dry. A totally believable story. A very cool story, but somehow she forgot to add the bit where, after she pointed out the absurdity of this letter signer's request, the entire cafe erupted in cheers, and the letter signer and his wife slunk away in shame. J.K. Rowling, who I'm hoping is going to come around fully, because she has attempted to placate her friends, and they have all turned on her. They all want to destroy her. She responded to Jennifer Finney Boylan. You're still following me, Jennifer. Be sure to publicly repent of your association with Goody Rowling before unfouling, and volunteer to operate the ducking stool next time as penance. Jesse Single commented, Matt Iglesias has been reported to his employer by a colleague for signing an open letter which argues that a climate of conformity, fear, and mutual surveillance has descended upon public intellectual life. Oh, Wesley Yang comments, doesn't want him punished, just wants everyone to know that supporting free speech, as Matt did, means supporting the oppression and abuse of vulnerable and marginalized people. He added, it's not necessary to fire someone if you can force them to comply. Matt Iglesias, late last night, clearly feeling the heat, tweeted, I've committed to not doing contentious stuff on Twitter anymore. Oh, God forbid. So I seriously can't comment on this and would appreciate being taken out of the thread. It was this, nah, I can't hear you. Yeah, well, they're going to make themselves heard, Matt, sooner rather than later. And he got into it with that little creep, Ezra Klein. Ezra Klein tweeted, a lot of debates that sell themselves as being about free speech are actually about power. And there's a lot of power in being able to claim and hold the mantle of free speech defender. No, there isn't. And you know it, you despicable little liar. I responded to Ezra Klein, Alice Clark, Herr Kommissar. So Matthew Iglesias responded, should I reply to this with a concrete example or stick to my commitments to you? Seems like Matt Iglesias might be looking for a new job soon. He further commented, I would like to de-escalate this. Nobody is losing their job. Not yet. Not yet. And I think I've spoken my mind very clearly on this subject. I'm just trying to move on to other things instead of endless rounds of Twitter wrangling. Ezra Klein has written a book called Why We're Polarized. Look in the mirror, pal. And he, it's also, he is fighting with with Les Miserables, the people whose side he is on. They have little power. Again, like the Stalinists of the 20s and 30s in the Soviet Union. Lauren Williams, who is a black woman, proof that Twitter is not real life. In real life, I'm the EIC of Vox and the fucking boss. I don't tweet. So folks who don't know or work with me seem to think that a variety of other people wield that power. We stand corrected, Lauren. Ezra Klein writes, the idea that I would try to get Matt, literally my co-founder and oldest friend in journalism, fired over this letter is risible. That means it induces laughter. I've asked Matt and others at Vox to not subtweet colleagues My mistake here is this read like a subtweet of him, which it honestly wasn't. I have no idea what he's talking about with these subtweets. Okay. Emily Vander Woof. Yes, Emily Vander Woof loves food. Pledge allegiance to the flag on July the 4th. Yep, pizza, tacos, and soda. A rather large woman is Emily. Emily lets us know, as the queen of all TV, I would like to say that season 5 of She-Ra is the best show of 2020. Everyone else can probably just go home. Please reply to this tweet so Emily can see how correct she is. Yes, a real, how would I say, highbrow thinker. Emily further writes, thank you to my new followers. You should be aware that most of the time I use this account to share TV hot takes, like The Sopranos is a good show. The Simpsons has frequently made me laugh a lot. Controversial opinions, they just keep coming and coming. Jon Stewart left The Daily Show at the exact right time, and the Lost finale is good. And someone named Sarah Galab entered the fray with, Emily's not trying to get her cis colleagues fired, guys. Word of advice, stay away as far as you can from anyone who refers to other people as cis whatever. I know because I've asked multiple times for her to fire me and she won't. What a card, that's Sarah. Julia Serrano. What do we know about her? Oh, she is a writer, performer, musician, scientist, very accomplished, author of Whipping Girl, Excluded, Outspoken, and debut novel 99 Erics. She writes, and now Jesse Single is going after Emily Vander Woof for her engaging in open debate about the Harper's letter. It's almost as if he doesn't really like open debate or trans women, or more specifically, trans women who engage in open debate. Open debate. Is that what it is? Yeah, okay, let's go to the chat. I'm not finished with this subject yet because it contains multitudes. I'm gonna have to sit up. Okay. Here, I had to adjust my chair. A lot of comments here. Okay. Chogokin666 says the Episcopal Church across the street has decided to use its limited funds to erect a giant Black Lives Matter banner on their edifice. Edgy, indeed. William Hicks, yes, please don't hate me, said the signatories. Yes, I am taking my brave stand in favor of free speech and open discussion. Oh my God, there's some friction here. Please don't hate me for my brave stand. Phlegmatica says the idea Trump has a distaste for argument and would prefer to silence critics is so absurd. He thrives on conflict, as he does. The Matt Iglesias saga is getting interesting. Yes, as I say, I believe he's looking for a new job right now. Jonathan Pohl said the golem is going to turn on Dr. Frankenstein. Well, yes. Yes, that's how it always works, isn't it? Oh, I'm just speaking out in favor of liberalism. Everyone is in favor of liberalism. Where have you been the last 20 years? Seriously, Josh Randall, Primavera versus Pesto. Primavera, no question. Okay, Dr. Frankenstein writes the checks. It won't happen, says Walrus Libertarian. I believe that Vox and Vice, to give two examples, are both in severe financial trouble. YT says Kasparov is anti-Putin fifth column. I do not like that man. He's also cheated at chess against one of the Polgar sisters, which was generally considered to previously to have been an unforgivable sin. He seems very much a deep state. Matt Forney says Zephyr Teach Out, LOL. Yeah, I remember years ago reading that critics, particularly American critics of Evil and Law, would complain that the names that he came up with for his American characters, even considering these were satirical novels, were absurd. Really? We have a fellow, a prominent actor called Zach Braff. That's like the opposite of what it used to be. Your name is Zach Braff? No, we're going to call you Matthew Steele from now on. Zach Braff? Are you kidding? Let's see. Matt Forney, like a who's who of has-beens. There's a lot of still-beens on that list. No question about it. Kosher, can someone explain what a kosher sandwich is, says YT? I'm still not quite clear. I think this was used in a metaphorical sense. Walrus Libertarian responds to YT, bankers own both sides of the debate. Dems and Repubs, for instance. Well, Dems and Repubs, sure. But if you look at Quillette, this is a liberal magazine. And it's pretty tepid stuff. But apparently it's part of the intellectual dark web, and it's scary. So no, the bankers are very clearly on the woke capital side of this debate. Phlegmaticus, look, lots of Hutus agree with me, cried the Tutsi. Yeah, we're not quite to that point, but we're getting there. We're getting there pretty fast. Choke again 666. Hi, we're going to genocide you folks. Would y'all get in the cattle car? Well, for now, they simply want to destroy people's livelihoods and destroy their position in society and that of their wives and their children. No one's being arrested yet. William Hicks, KMG is officially subversive. I suppose I could take pride in that, but it takes so little to be considered subversive these days. Tom Anderson says, after the trans thing, they'll push something even weirder and more bizarre. I wonder what it will be. Well, we already have the furries and the other kings, and of course, pedophilia or minor attracted personship or whatever. That's trending. That's definitely trending. Mike F. said, if cancel culture came from the right, local theater troops from coast to coast would be putting on the Crucible, but since it comes from the left, well, yeah, I grew up in a generation where school children all had to read the Crucible, and witches. Oh, this is absolutely outrageous. I mean, how, wrong would you have to be to believe in witches? Well, starting in the 1960s, and increasingly so, we have a large number of people in the West who actually call themselves witches. Lana Del Rey, that's not her real name. She, what was it, a year or two ago, she became involved in some sort of coven group that was chanting curses against Donald Trump. It doesn't seem to have affected her popularity at all. Okay. YT, these people must be exorcised. Nothing short of exorcising actual demons out of them will work. Yeah, I can't see that coming. But, as I say, my advice, ABA, always be avoiding. All sorts of people to avoid. All sorts of people never to get into any discussion. Metal Mike says Stephen King is a twisted. Yeah. Well, there is that underage gangbang in It. The passage was pointed out to me, and I could hardly believe it. It was, let's say, the level of detail in it. Isn't J.K. Rowling worth nearly $1 billion, says William Hicks. This is absolutely true. And she has decided to reap one of the benefits of her vast wealth. And I congratulate her for it, because there are so many others who do not. Metal Mike says, I remember when feminists were allied with evangelicals in their condemnation of pornography, not just pornography, but prostitution. Now the main line in feminism is that pornography is great and prostitution is great too. Sex work, it's work, and it's empowering work. Yeah, the fact that most of these women are effectively sex slaves. Yeah, I don't know. Our Finnish friend Jaakko Raipala says, ooh, Kevin doesn't want to join the intellectual dark web. So sad. I was looking forward to seeing him on Joe Rogan talking about weed for 3 hours. Again, Joe Rogan's apotheosis is a complete mystery to me because I remember him only as the least funny cast member of news radio. Oh, Pinker. We're going to get to Pinker soon enough because the mob has come for him. Okay. Vesta Lejuba. On with the motley. Someone called Asia Romano, who was on the culture staff at Vox. Fandom, fanfic, movie, TV, theater critic, horror, ex-Harry Potter nerd, they/she, K-pop stan since 2005. This person, and I don't want to misgender this person, I believe this is a transgender female, but one can't be too sure. She contributed, Today Sucked, the Harper's letter, Today Sucked. That's exactly the way a critic speaks. The Harper's letter is a dehumanizing, transphobic whisper network. It's not a whisper network. It is a letter which has been signed by 150 people, and you can read their names. How does a person like this manage to get a job writing for money? Well, actually, I know the reason, but, I just like to ask the question. Everyone who signed it has contributed to the real harm that its legion of transphobic signatories have brought to real trans people, especially teens. And Asia followed up with, yesterday, 3 trans Vox writers spoke against the Harper's list, and all of us have now been directly targeted and harassed as a result by one of the writers on it. Just us, no other critics of the list. I want to be very clear about who benefits and who doesn't benefit from this debate. Yeah, give us a name or I don't believe you. I don't believe anything that these people say. Oh, someone called Natasha Devon, who I understand is an advocate of non-traditional beauty forms, and also one of these people who makes money talking about mental health. And, mental health problems. Here's how to deal with mental health problems. And let's not stigmatize mental health. She looks not entirely compos in this picture of her, which she tweeted, I'm on BBC Scott 9 tonight talking about how troubling I find it that transphobes, racists, and misogynists have appropriated the free speech, it's put in scare quotes, narrative, in an attempt to avoid consequences of their hate speech. Yeah, who has the power? Who has the power? Michelle Malkin, and I like this woman more and more, she tweeted, calling out cancel culture king Ben Shapiro, who told me I would, quote, regret it, unquote, if I defended Groypers, America First, and Nick J. Fuentes for exposing YAF, TPUSA, Con Inc., and Open Borders Inc. I don't regret a damn thing. Retweet if you know who our enemies are and aren't afraid to name them. Oh, Steven Pinker. I don't like Steven Pinker. I think that he's a buffoon because every day in every way, things are getting better and better. And we can measure the happiness of a society. We can measure the happiness of a world by the GDP. And David Berlinski made hash of him in his book on atheism, which I highly recommend. So this is from the College Fix. The far left continues to attack and defame not only those on the right, but also those on the left who dare tout things like data and common sense above narrative seeped in blind rage. The latest victim is famed Harvard University professor Steven Pinker, who certainly has his bona fides as a Democrat despite his propensity for independent thought. Pinker was attacked in an open letter to the Linguistic Society of America, which essentially accused the scholar of the usual racism, sexism, misogyny. The long and short of it is that these letter signers are mostly upset by some tweets from Pinker over the years that call for police reform rather than knee-jerk reaction to blame police shootings on systemic racism. The whole takedown attempt has been summarized by University of Chicago biology professor Jerry Coyne on his popular personal blog in a post headlined, "The Purity Posse Pursues Pinker." Coyne points out that many of the signatories are grad students and undergrads, and the letter shows no familiarity with Pinker's work and takes statements out of context in a way that, with the merest checking, are seen to be represented duplicity. Yeah, well, that's not really relevant anymore, is it? It's all about feelings. It's all about, how is it, what was that Robert Wright said? It was about, anger and heartache? Yeah, it's all about anger and heartache. Some outrageous tweets from Steven Pinker. This is from 2015. Data, police don't shoot blacks disproportionately. Problem, not race, but too many police shootings. And from 2017, police kill too many people, black and white. Focus on race distracts from solving problem, as we do with plane crashes. From 2014, the idea that the University of California, Santa Barbara murders are part of a pattern of hatred against women is statistically obtuse. And I believe he's speaking there about the Supreme Gentleman. What was his name? Elliot Rodger. Another tweet, this one from 2020, Harvard social science dean Lawrence Bobo did the research I've cited on the decline of overt racism in the US. Here he reflects cautious optimism on race relations in the context of police killings of black men. Again, from this here, another expert on urban crime, Ron Brutson, points out protests focus on over-policing, but under-policing is also deadly. The scholars, in reaction to this, contend that Pinker is guilty of, quote, a pattern of downplaying the very real violence of systemic racism and sexism, and moreover, a pattern that is not above deceitfulness, misrepresentation, or the employment of dog whistles. Pinker responded, cancel culture has entered its decadent phase. Don't blame the LSA, at least not yet. They haven't canceled me and probably won't. Touch wood. Don't blame established linguists. I recognize only one name among the signatories. Well, I think that suggests, Professor Pinker, that you've not been inclusive enough, because I think that it's highly likely that a great number of the signatories are people of color. Is it okay for me to say that? I'll say black people and people of color, okay? Also, non-binary people, gender liquid people, trans people, and others who fear for their lives because apparently society is attempting to erase them. Yeah, erase them. That's what they say. James Kirkpatrick comments in terms of, oh, here we go. Got some of the local vibrancy going on in the background. Oh, we got the two types of sirens going. Okay. I'm just going to charge ahead. James Kirkpatrick. Whoa, I can't speak over that. Maybe it's coming right up to my door. Okay, here we go. In terms of the power disparity, James Kirkpatrick writes, burn the American flag, free speech. Topple a statue, not even a crime. Paint over a mural, hate crime. Will fearless leader Donald Trump pardon these guys, or will he tweet some more about how the things that are happening now, right now, will keep happening if Biden takes over? Yes, you may have seen that two people, they put black paint over a Black Lives Matter with black paint over a Black Lives Matter mural. And they're now charged with a hate crime. This is an official statement from Diana Becton, District Attorney from the Office of the District Attorney Contra Costa County. In total, the defendants are charged for the following alleged offenses: violation of civil rights, vandalism under $400, and possession of tools to commit vandalism or graffiti. This is exactly what Sam Francis talked about with anarcho-tyranny. Oh, I see. The police district attorney's office, they take vandalism and graffiti seriously? Do they? Because I'm going to suggest, particularly when I see some of the very inventive and dangerous places that have been tagged, as the kids like to say, that if the police were to, send a couple of patrol cars around, they could nab a lot of people. But no, they just don't care. If convicted, both defendants face up to a year in county jail, and the alleged offenses are exempt from a specific bail amount. Maybe they'll get a good brutalizing in the county jail, awaiting trial. Maybe they will. The decadent phase. Well, decadence is everywhere. We live in a decadent society. No question about that. There was a term, Weimerica, which Ryan Landry popularized a few years ago. You don't hear it much anymore, I think, because it rather started as a joke, and then people realized that it was all too real, and we know what follows Weimar, and that's Hitler, and I guess people don't want to think about that. Anyway, someone called David Kaufman writes at Level, which is part of Medium, Washington, D.C.'s pro football team, Aunt Jemima pancake products, Eskimo pies. They're all examples of the everyday racism that bombards people of color, don't you mean black people, from the supermarket to the playing field. They're also all iconic American products that both corporations and consumers finally agree are ready for a rebrand. Oh, the consumers? They finally agreed that they were ready for a rebrand? I would suggest that if that were true, people would have stopped buying Aunt Jemima products. They would have stopped buying Eskimo pies. They would have stopped patronizing the Washington Redskins. And you see, this fellow can't even mention the name. It is so offensive. But what about the far more subtle streams of everyday racism that course through our homes, our workplaces, and the outside world? These instances may be far subtler than a mascot or an offensive team, but are no less pervasive and no less deserving of cultural reckoning. For me, this reckoning begins again with the reckoning with traffic signals. A few months back, before COVID-19 kept us in our homes and George Floyd made us take to the streets, I was walking with a friend, her daughter, and my twin sons. My friend is white, and I'm not. Something I'd never given a second thought. Really? You hadn't? I don't believe you. Till we reached a crosswalk. Remember, honey, she said to her daughter as we waited for the light to turn green, we need to wait for the little white man to appear before we can cross the street. I realized that white people, boo, white people, like to exert control over nearly everything everyone does. I thought, but since when did this literally include trying to cross the street? Part of my surprise here was a function of age. I thought, this is a troll. This has to be a troll. This has to be satire. Apparently not. Apparently not. But as a black dad, I was struck by the language at play. How is it possible that well into the 21st century, parents all over Manhattan, well-meaning BLM marching parents, are teaching their children to ask little white men for permission to cross the street? And why doesn't this seem to bother them? Okay, David Kaufman. White, bright color, very bright color. That's why it's chosen. That's why it's chosen. Okay, and the color red, or don't walk, red is on stop signs. It's associated with a warning of some kind. But so David Kaufman is a black man, and judging by his surname, he would appear to be Jewish. So we got a lot of intersectional turmoil going on there. Okay, you remember the case of the two Coopers, where a Canadian woman, resident in New York, became the most hated woman in America because she got into a contretemps by a bird watcher called Christian Cooper, leading homosexual advocate, over an unleashed dog, hers. And he said to her, you do what you have to do, and I will do what I have to do, which sounds like a threat to me. He also talked about all the dog treats that he keeps in his pocket. Why? Why would you do that? But in any event, Christian Cooper, the bird watcher, has announced that he is not going to cooperate with the police in the criminal case against Amy Cooper, who is being charged with making a false statement to the police, or a false claim to the police. I'm going to, throw out this hypothesis here that if this went to trial, and I noted that Amy Cooper has secured the services of a well-known attorney. I think he writes he's a Cornell professor who writes a law blog. There might be questions asked about what Christian Cooper was actually doing in Central Park. Outrageous, I know. So it's a bunch of protesters, with their anger and their heartache. Violent? What are you talking about? My old friend Dennis Dale at his blog, which is called Untethered, he has been doing reporting on this, and it appears to be complete anarchy in the city of Portland, but the news media isn't interested. This anarchy has been going on for months and months, but, Antifa is pretty closely associated with it, and this is kind of embarrassing, okay? He has a series of reports called Siege Notes, Portland. Rupley is reporting National Guard troops, this is from yesterday, are now on the streets of Portland per Kate Brown's authorization, but appears to be Border Patrol and other federal agents making arrests in response to Antifa's broadening its attack to include the federal courthouse. The governor issued the order June 1st, declaring the 50 troops would be unarmed and behind the scenes wrapped in a lot of Summer of Orange man bad supplication. But Antifa may have miscalculated in taking on the feds, who don't need the city government's approval to defend the courthouse and the federal building, which sit on either side of the besieged Justice Center. Farther down this path is the possibility of conflict between federal and local authorities over the monopoly on violence in Portland. We're in our second month of declining law and order. Federal charges were filed today. The U.S. Attorney in Oregon made charges against 7 protesters who were accused of defacing a federal courthouse and assaulting federal officers during protests against racial injustice and police brutality. The protester facing the most charges used his body to hold the doors to the courthouse shut to prevent federal officers from coming out to confront demonstrators and cause the glass to shatter. Other protesters then threw fireworks inside the courthouse and at federal officers. Couldn't this be construed as attempted murder? Starting a small fire in the entryway, according to court papers. Before this, unmarked federal agents in tactical gear had emerged from the building to arrest at least 2 demonstrators trying to breach the boarded-up glass front. U.S. Marshals are tasked with providing security during normal times. Portland police are also being reinforced now with sheriffs and cops from other jurisdictions. Nightly, Antifa continued to rally around the stump of the elk statue they bagged, so to speak, when the city was forced to remove it. Antifa should have a bronze elk head mounted on its clubhouse wall to commemorate the feat. So they removed the statue of an elk. I previously made the claim that these protesters hate history, but it could be more than that. Perhaps they really, really hate statuary. From what Dennis Dale reports, these are very organized protesters. I thought I saw them using radios. They also have their own ambulance now. And they also have provisions. Let's see. This is from July the 5th. The mood, and he's reporting on Independence Day, the mood was ominous around 7 in the afternoon, where the crowd was just beginning to form in front of the Justice Center and now fair game to rioters, apparently, the U.S. District Court building. An effective sound system was playing hip-hop. Stands were set up here and there in the park blocks, giving out food and water. Stacks of pizza were available at a main tent where someone was setting up for a video shoot. Somewhere, someone was barbecuing. Off somewhere, I could hear a furious black man asserting himself in urban pidgin, something about not giving a fuck. Whether this had to do with racial injustice or the usual petty personal honor, I couldn't tell. I'm sure they can't. Later, an overwhelmingly white crowd would riot, putting a good 1,000 or more on the streets to shoot fireworks at the edifices of the law for the usual purpose, to draw the police out, forcing them to violently clear the streets and provide any plausible examples of brutality that can be fed back into the narrate-o-matic as proof the police are irredeemable. They were very vocal about protecting their tiny contingent of non-whites from the police, who presumably were just itching to have at them. For a while, they were all led by an effeminate black man with orange hair. Antifa is taken to impersonating the police sound truck that plays over a loudspeaker the standard admonitions to clear the street, etc. There's probably a law somewhere against false emergency broadcasts. There's a lot here, reports for several days, and I highly recommend them if you want to know what's going on in Portland. Again, a story that the mainstream media is not interested in, simply not interested in. So, is Joe Biden going to debate Donald Trump? Well, we have a trial balloon, which has been raised, which is that no, should not debate. And we have this from no less than one of the leading thinkers of our time, Thomas L. Friedman. Although I will note that NoHo Hank on HBO's Barry has a low opinion of Tom Friedman, calling him, saying that he was stupid and nobody likes you. So Thomas Friedman says that no, there should be no debate, that Joe Biden should not agree to debate Donald Trump unless two conditions are met. First, that Trump release his tax returns, and second, that a team of recognized fact checkers is there to provide real-time fact checking of everything that is said. Yeah, because it's not possible for people to make up their own minds. They'll just have someone like Daniel Dale, no relation of Dennis Dale, the former Glee cast member and former reporter for the Toronto Star, who's now with CNN, telling us about the 37,563 lies that Orange Badman has uttered this year alone. Obviously, Biden is going to come up with some sort of excuse to avoid a debate, to avoid public appearances. This is one of the reasons for the new onslaught of hysteria over COVID-19. No question in my mind that the hysteria has to be kept going until November the 3rd, because you got to drag Joe Biden across the finishing line. Yeah, it's about once a month. But once a month, do the Wignats come for me, and I'm a little curious as to why. Someone who calls himself Goy Biden, and he is at 45 April 30th. What happened on April the 30th, 1945? Well, Adolf Hitler blew his brains out and then presumably ascended to Valhalla to be serenaded for eternity by Valkyries. Yes, apparently I'm a bad person because I worship Jesus Christ, and there were 3 brackets around Jesus. Jesus Christ was Jewish? I had no idea. You astonish me, man, and calling me a Shabbos goy and the like. I you keep saying it. I don't care. Oh, apparently my latest great sin was that I didn't specify that David Frum is Jewish. David Frum, Jewish? Color me astonished. I don't know. Do they think I've had these various attempts to convert me to National Socialism, the unconventional conservatism of National Socialism? And I don't know. I suppose one of my responses is that Hitler was a loser. Germany was in flames. They're making the rubble dance in 1945. And of course, large portions of Germany were lost forever. East Prussia, Pomerania, the great city of Breslau, forever. All for Hitler's vanity. Also, Hitler, worst immigrant ever. So, Molly Hemingway writes on The Federalist, America needs to stop reacting to coronavirus like a bunch of hysterics. Harvard University recently announced that it will ban students from in-person classes for the entirety of the next academic year. And by the way, they're charging exactly as much money. The decision, not based on science, is typical of the decisions made by many elites in response to the coronavirus sweeping the globe. But I'll say, again, if the universities cancel their classes, again, it's a COVID emergency, and we can't have people going to the ballot box on November the 3rd. It would just be too unsafe. We're going to have mail-in votes, which can be, safely harvested for days or weeks after November the 3rd. She continues, global pandemics aren't new, but the way many Americans are responding to this one is Americans have been blessed to experience few pandemics in recent decades. The swine flu of 2009 was no fun, as my husband can attest, but it resulted in only 273,304 hospitalizations and 12,469 deaths in the United States. The Wuhan virus hospitalizations and deaths have eclipsed these numbers many times over. The 1957 Asian flu killed 116,000 Americans at a time when the U.S. population was 172 million, just more than half the current population. That would be the equivalent of 222,000 Americans today. By comparison, the coronavirus has killed 133,000 Americans thus far. Well, no, it hasn't, actually. Sorry to disagree with Molly Hemingway, but the stats have been juiced. And the CDC has admitted that stats have been juiced because they're including people who've never even been tested. They're including people who have COVID-19, but have clearly died from other causes such as gunshot wounds. Let's see, the 1968 Hong Kong flu was also bad, killing about 100,000 Americans when the population was just 60% of what it is now. America is in an epic battle with the Wuhan coronavirus. She asserts it's not fun. I don't think this is an epic battle at all. I think it is, it's a farce. But I agree that there's no reason to panic. William Briggs, the statistician to the stars, the latest update. Calm down. Record testing is why there are record cases. Oh no, we're all going to die again. And he has a graph here of the number of daily COVID tests in the U.S. And it goes like this. It goes like this. So far, since the start of the insanity, there have been 36 million tests. This plot is the number of daily tests. On July the 5th, for instance, there were 654,000 new tests. I repeat, this plot is the number of new daily tests by day, 650,000 reported tests per day. If your jaw is not dropping, you have not understood this plot. It is not total tests. Testing is increasing everywhere day by day. Testing is going nuts. Testing is out of control. Testing is rampant. Testing is at insane levels and only growing. Why is this important? I'll tell you. Because we hear from every propaganda source that we are seeing a surge and spike and record new cases. Of course there are record cases. We're testing like mad. It would be a shock if we didn't see a surge in new cases with all of this testing. Pardon my screaming, but we have gone, as the phrase has it, stark raving mad. I'm beside myself with frustration trying to explain this to people who are so panicked they can't listen to reason. Now, look at this picture, the official weekly dead, according to the CDC, as of July the 2nd for week ending June 27th. And the graph goes like this, and then, like a 45-degree angle downwards from about, let's say, April the 17th. Notice anything? You may not have reached the apex of probability like I, the statistician to the stars, have, But surely you can see the most salient point. Deaths are decreasing even as new cases surge, spike, soar, set records. And this is not, how would I say, occult knowledge, but the media is lying to us. And a great many of the experts, so-called, are lying to us. Briggs continues, "Dear reader, help me understand how much the latest insane, panicked, hysterical, gibbering response is due to the idiocy or evil of those appointed over us. It is obviously a mix and depends on the entity issuing orders or reporting news. But no matter how you slice it, sanity has left the building. If the experts appointed over us can't see or didn't think to check data like that above, then they are idiots. If they did check, then they are evil for pushing new measures, new lockdowns. Which is it? Take the case of the godmother, Andrew Cuomo. We are seeing, I believe, regression to the mean. The man's father had something upstairs, but Cuomo Sr.'s sons did not share in the inheritance. In the godmother's case, I believe we have an equal mixture of stupidity and arrogance, but I'm willing to be corrected. What do you say? The lower echelons of the media are like Cuomo, equal parts dumb and evil. The top is all malevolence. The gaslighting has already begun. Remember how it was okay to riot, loot, and commit random acts of mayhem? Then all experts agreed you must damn all to Corona doom. But if you wanted to grill on the 4th, you were told how awful you were to do so, especially without a mask. We're not the only ones noticing the madness, and he includes a video of Nobel Prize-winning chemist Michael Levitt, and YouTube took it down on Monday. The truth is out there, as they say, but our guardians do not want us to know the truth. Toronto Public Health, and I'll get to Toronto in just a minute, tweeted on June 24th, individuals who have died with COVID-19, but not as a result of COVID-19, are included in the case counts for COVID-19 deaths in Toronto. This is fraud. This is fraud. Peter Evans responded, I'd like to understand why you're instructing the media to record any death as a COVID death, even if the death was caused by unrelated conditions or reasons, according to doctors. Besides testing, why are we seeing so many new cases? A case is now an infection, past or present. That's not what doctors used to call cases, which were infections requiring or seeking treatment. Now, any positive test is a case. Naturally, since infections are greater than cases, calling everything past and present a case exaggerates the count. All right. Let's see what Alex Berenson has to say. And he refers to a 2006 paper which discusses the uselessness of lockdowns, masks, and school closings during epidemics. More shocking, the lead authors are Tom Inglesby and Jennifer Nuzzo, who are now two leading members of Team Apocalypse. What's changed? Not the science. Joking aside, we have thrown out decades of carefully crafted recommendations based on generations of research for a virus that is less risky than these guidelines anticipated. Why? Media hysteria, liability fears, sheer apocalyptic excitement. Your guess is as good as mine. So much good stuff today. Here, a manual of CDC guidelines for a flu pandemic from 2017. So long ago. They don't recommend the use of face masks by well persons except under special high-risk circumstances during severe pandemics, aka the Spanish flu. In fact, CDC barely recommends mask use by ill persons. How about that? All the experts told us you don't need masks. And then, just as COVID-19 had well past its peak and is petering out, oh no, you got to wear masks. You got to wear masks. It's all about control. And as I say, dragging Senate Joe Biden across the finishing line. Berenson continues, this is quite the paper on masks published in the British Medical Journal in 2015. A randomized trial, the gold standard, yada, yada, of 1,600 healthcare workers showed those wearing masks were 6 times as likely to have flu-like illnesses as those in the control group as 4 weeks. I'll just repeat that. The study showed that those wearing masks were 6 times as likely to have flu-like illnesses as those in the control group after 4 weeks. To be clear, even in the control arm, some workers wore medical masks, although compliance in the control arm was low, but it is not clear that medical masks helped. Maybe the most stunning number, 97% of cloth masks admitted viral particles. I mean, I know one thing has changed in 14 years, but it's not the science. Let's see. On prohibition of social gatherings during flu epidemics, public events within expected large attendance have sometimes been canceled. There are, however, no indications these actions have had any definitive effect on the severity or duration of an epidemic. Also, it is difficult to imagine how bus, rail, or air travelers could stay 3 feet apart from each other throughout an epidemic, and such a recommendation would greatly complicate normal daily tasks like grocery shopping, banking, and the like. What's different now? On social distancing, it has been recommended that individuals maintain a distance of 3 feet or more, not 6, during a pandemic so as to diminish the number of contacts with people who may be infected. The efficacy of this measure is unknown. On masks, studies have shown the ordinary surgical mask does little to prevent inhalation of small droplets bearing influenza virus. The pores in the mask become blocked by moisture from breathing, and the airstream simply diverts around the mask. I'm going to pat myself on the back here. This doesn't give me any pleasure, but I've been pointing out since I believe March the 17th that this social distancing diktat is useless and bogus. If we really wanted to do this, we would have locked everyone in their homes. I mean, maybe bolted the doors shut, and the army would have delivered food. Because failing that, when you have people walking on the sidewalks, walking other places, walking to the grocery store, the liquor store, the drugstore, etc., people are going to get, within 3 feet of each other, let alone 6 feet of each other. We are, I guess we're in a post-truth world here. And I've talked about Vancouver Island a lot on the stream because that is where I live. And it is an island which is important in terms of spread of disease. This is from CTV yesterday. BC announces 12 new COVID-19 cases, 1 on Vancouver Island. Yeah, there's 5.1 million people in British Columbia and almost 800,000 people on Vancouver Island. Since the pandemic began, BC has seen a total of 2,990 coronavirus cases and 183 deaths. As I've noted before, 170 people died in May alone of drug overdoses in Vancouver, not British Columbia, just Vancouver. Over the same period, 2,645 people who tested positive for COVID-19 have now recovered, leaving 162 active cases in the province. Of those cases, 16 people are in hospital for treatment, including 4 who are in critical care. Now, this just infuriates me. We're going to have a second spike. The hospitals are going to be overwhelmed. It's going to be COVID-geddon. No, we had this period where, assuming that you believe that social distancing and masks and the rest of it work, that no one was paying any attention to this, all right? So you had all of these people being exposed, and what this led to in a province of 5.1 million people was fewer than, specifically 183 deaths. And on Vancouver Island, 3 deaths. This is not even a crisis, let alone a catastrophe. The sainted, Dr. Bonnie Henry, Chief Medical Officer of my province, says, while there are no active community outbreaks in BC, new cases and community exposure events continue to occur in the community. Yeah, so Seriously. Seriously. Let's see. It is important to remember that the more people you see and the more places you go, the higher the likelihood is that you'll come into contact with someone with COVID-19. You think so? To protect yourself, the best things you can do are to keep the number of people you see to a minimum and as much as possible maintain a safe distance from others and use a mask when that is challenging. Well, people aren't paying attention to this, at least in Victoria, the capital of my province. And again, this is absolute nonsense. We know that COVID-19, the average age of the people killed in British Columbia is something like 87. My father was 89 when he died in May. He had it. Whether he died of it, I haven't seen the death certificate yet. But for the vast majority of people, coronavirus is not a serious threat to their health, and it never has been. The deaths in Canada, 82% coming from long-term facilities for old people. And this was because they were infected, because people did not follow procedures. In Ontario and Quebec, well, the government infected them and killed them by exposing these very old people to people who were infected, who've been pushed into nursing homes. And furthermore, a large part of the frontline workers, particularly in Ontario and Quebec, simply fled in terror. Before I talk about Ontario, let's go back to the chat here. Aslan says fear and oxygen deprivation will make one ill. Yes, yes, indeed. YT says, how many fake crises does it take for these sheep to wake up? Maybe they don't want to wake up. You know, we've been telling ourselves, or at least, I don't know, people who've been in the pundit game, as I have, that the people of Canada, that the people of the United States love liberty and they love freedom. Do they? Do they? Because the past few months have seemed to have demonstrated the opposite. A Contra coup says authorities have literally burned through all of the public trust. Standard operating procedure since the bubonic plague has come under question because the media and government have lied so much. They want to turn us into Chinese, which is what they want to do. That the government will come out with some new diktat and we will say, yes, of course we will do it because we are Chinese now. Even to question, how would I say, not just the legality, but the efficacy of any of these diktats is to make one a thought criminal, or as the media would put it, a murderer. Okay, if yeah, I'm not going to get into that. A Contra coup masks don't significantly block O2 molecules. They block virus particulates and absorb vapor droplets that contain viruses. It's literally that simple. As I say, and I've been talking about this for months, and this is not a cult. It's not hidden knowledge. There is absolutely no consensus on the efficacy of masks. None. None. There isn't. But now, no, you're a very bad person if you don't want to mask. James Andrew disagrees with me. I will point out many studies, including from the CDC, which I just read, saying that masks don't work. They don't work. Don from Beyond says less than 4,000 COVID deaths in the whole state of Florida, and they shut down the entire state. Makes me so angry. At least Florida has been less tyrannical than many states, such as New York. Oh, now we're shutting this down again. And California. Oh, now we're shutting down the bars again. Now we're shutting down the beaches again. Now we're going to shut this down. Why? Because we can. Florida population is 21.5 million, which is roughly the same population as the state of New York, where Governor Death has been in charge, where the death toll is many times higher. Don from Beyond continues, I got turned down for unemployment benefits, so I have to temporarily continue my DoorDash job, but at least no mandatory masks in my town, so it'll be bearable. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Yes, everyone is dissing Florida now for going to the beaches and living lives. No, you can't do that. That would be wicked. We all have to cower in fear. Again, the stuff that I was seeing from the United States over the 4th of July holiday weekend made me very sad. Very sad indeed. The land of the, what did it say? The land of the brave. Oh, I just managed to mess that up. I must be tired. But brave and free people, not anymore. Of course, my country is just as bad, if not worse. Okay, let's talk about Ontario. And the reason I'm talking about Ontario is because masks are now mandatory in the Ottawa region, Ottawa being the capital of Canada. And they are now mandatory. That just came into force, I believe, yesterday in Toronto, which is the capital of Ontario and the most heavily populated city in Canada. This is from the Ottawa Citizen yesterday. New Ontario cases at March levels, minister says. No new cases or deaths in Ottawa. So obviously the perfect time to insist that everyone must wear masks. Ottawa reported 112 new cases of COVID-19 in the previous 24 hours, bringing the number of confirmed cases to 36,060. I will mention again that Ontario forced infected people into nursing homes. And this same thing happened in Quebec, only the death toll was much higher. The total number of deaths in Ontario is now 2,691. 2691. Oh, Ontario is to introduce legislation to enable the extension of some pandemic emergency orders over the next year after the official state of emergency ends July the 15th. Solicitor General Sylvia Jones said the measures would allow government to extend or amend some emergency orders a month at a time, with the law expiring a year after it's passed. Premier Doug Ford has said that he hoped not to extend the state of emergency after July the 15th. If the bill passes, the government could move parts of the province back to earlier stages of the pandemic lockdown if required. Yeah, this is about control. It's entirely about control. 2691 deaths. What is the population of Ontario? It is 14.4 million people. All right. And how many people die in Ontario every year? Well, in 2019, 109,173 died. It's all fake. It's all fake. This hysteria is, listen to the experts. Well, some of the experts, anyway. Listen to the health commissars who like their time in the sun and wish it to continue. And listen to the media, which has been screaming, we're all going to die since February. I don't know, whenever they could turn it against Donald Trump, because you remember the first line from the World Health Organization and the line from the CDC in the United States and the line from the sainted Dr. Theresa Tam, who was the Chief Medical Officer of Canada, was COVID is not a big deal. You know what the big deal is? Xenophobia and racism. Boy, they sure turned on a dime there. Didn't they? And there's a woman who writes, she used to write for the CBC, she writes for the Globe and Mail now, called Robin Urbach. She seems like a nice young woman, but she's callow, and she's a millennial. Do I repeat myself? She has just a withering, a Swiftian satire in the Globe and Mail today. It should be my right to drive my car with my eyes closed. Who am I hurting, really? Ooh, zing. Inspired by the bravery of the now infamous Toronto woman who refused to wear a mask in hospital while seeking treatment for a suspected broken finger, I would like to bring attention to another inconvenience that has similarly sacrificed individual freedoms at the altar of public good. I am frankly fed up with so-called experts telling me that I cannot drive on the highway with my eyes closed. It's enough. Freedom should not be conditional on the fickle opinions of city planners or occupational health and safety specialists or my auto insurance provider. It should be my right as a free citizen to close my eyes and daydream about picking up food from that taco place by my house. You always notice that these millennials they always have to write about food. They always have to work in food and coffee, in everything that they write. Yes, to close my eyes and daydream of picking up food from that taco place by my house as I merge into traffic on the 400 series highways. If you tasted their refried beans, I'm sure you would understand what I'm saying. No, I don't. Refried beans, that's like for poor people, really poor people, like Mexican peasants, isn't it? And you made a fetish of this. This is a terrible metaphor for the obvious reason that I don't know how people would be able to get out of their driveway if they closed their eyes or covered them, and you wouldn't get very far without crashing or driving off the road. The fact is that Robin Urbach, the chances of, if she got COVID-19, the chances of anything serious happening to her would be, what, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000. But she seems to believe that there's some sort of conspiracy, one to infect her and one to kill her. And nobody is interested in this. The bottom line is that if God didn't want me to drive with my eyes closed, he wouldn't have made chewable Benadryl so delicious. Callow, as I say. Relentlessly callow. I don't know, do millennials really find this sort of thing so very amusing? But we see who the big villain is here. It's organized religion. There's a story from DNYUZ, and I still don't know what that means. Churches were eager to reopen. Now they are a major source of coronavirus cases. Weeks after President Trump demanded that America's shuttered houses of worship be allowed to open, new outbreaks of the coronavirus are surging through churches across the country where services have resumed. The virus has infiltrated Sunday sermons, meetings of ministers, and Christian youth camps in Colorado and Missouri. It has struck churches that reopened cautiously with face masks and social distancing in the pews, as well as some that defied lockdowns and refused to heed new limits on the number of worshipers. How do you know that they're getting this from the church and not from the 100 other places they could get it from? There's a very fine line between protecting the health and safety of people and protecting the right to worship, says George Murdoch, a county commissioner in northeastern Oregon, where Christianity has effectively been banned. I mean, if you look at Washington State, and if you look at Oregon, and you look in Northern California, as that fellow on Silicon Valley said, you're better off admitting to be a heroin addict than a Christian. That would be Erlich Bachman. So yes, it's the churches. The churches are the big villains. Now, someone made the claim yesterday, the day before, on this stream, that Holy Communion, the reception of it, has been banned in the city of Toronto. Now, I spent about an hour tracking this down today on the internet. This is not a story that the media is interested in, because none of them go to church. So why would they? They don't worship, the spaghetti monster. So, why would they think that anyone else would be interested in the question of whether Holy Communion is banned in Toronto? On June 20th, this is from Pravmir.com, Orthodox Christianity and the World. On June 20th, the city government of Toronto issued revised COVID-19 guidelines that banned the offering of Holy Communion to the faithful. The new guidelines read, all places of worship must adhere to the following requirements: general guidance, suspend all communion-related activities as advised by Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health. This advice calls for suspending activities that increase risk of disease transmission, including sharing or distributing materials or objects, which may include, but is not limited to, books, communion, microphones, prayer mats, prayer shawls, water, etc. The new guidelines also suspend indoor singing activities and choir service and limit participation in services to no more than 30% of the capacity of the premises. The Greek Orthodox metropolis of Toronto of the Patriarchate of Constantinople published a video of the Sunday service from July the 5th at St. Nicholas Church in Toronto on YouTube, in which Father Honorius Pappus emotionally tells his congregation that just the night before he had been informed by diocesan authorities that per the city's instructions, he was not to offer the faithful Holy Communion. He said to his flock, "My brethren, today I have a great sadness. Last night we were told from our archdiocese that the city of Toronto forbade Holy Communion for the area of Toronto, and it looks like the persecution of the church continues. I have no words to express my disappointment and my sadness, and I feel that I cannot share with you today any sermon because I feel that I cannot talk about faith, about Christ. I feel at this moment I only want to ask God to forgive us, to forgive our little faith, to forgive our weakness, to forgive us because we are not worthy to keep the great blessing of the Orthodox faith." And I'm looking at a picture of this guidance, which comes from Toronto Health, and it's completely legitimate. You know, this is not fake, but there's a problem here. There's a problem. Is it really banned? Is it really banned? Because it seems that there is a conflict between the guidance from Toronto or Ontario medical authorities and what the law says. This is from Toronto Catholic Witness on June the 26th. Cardinal Collins claims that he was bullied by Toronto Public Health into banning Holy Communion on the tongue. Vox Cantoris has just posted an extremely troubling video in which Cardinal Collins claims he was bullied into surrendering to the illegal and aggressive demands of the public health authorities in Toronto. Vox reviews a number of serious implications going forward about rogue state bureaucrats taking over the doctrinal and liturgical practices of the church and their attacks upon the right of free worship in Canada. I have read the 5 guidelines so far from Ontario Public Health, Toronto Public Health, York Region Public Health, Middlesex London Health Unit, and KFLA and Public Health. Whereas Ontario Public Health, Toronto, and FFLA&A are on record to suppress Holy Communion outright, York Region makes no mention, and Middlesex London refers to sharing a chalice and food and beverages. There is no doubt that most public health authorities do not consider Christian worship essential to human life. That is because their conception of life is purely materialistic and atheistic. If you read the documents, it is plain to see. But the fact remains, Holy Communion was not banned under Ontario legislation. It is not even mentioned. Ontario Public Health admits as much when their document states that in the event of a conflict between this document and emergency orders or directives prevail. In other words, they admit these guidelines do not have the force of law. Incredibly, though, they are going about the province trying to intimidate and bully churches. In Ontario, we have public health officials illegally and unconstitutionally going about interfering in public acts of worship. In the video, Cardinal Collins can be seen squirming uncomfortably as he states Toronto Public Health wanted to outright ban Holy Communion. He is correct. It is in their guidelines. What he did not point out that the same guidelines in the very same line after banning Holy Communion duplicitously refer this ban to Ontario Public Health. We have seen the duplicitous nature of that document. 2. Cardinal Collins in the video paraphrases the medical authorities' reaction to Holy Communion on the tongue. What? You've got to be kidding. Really? Not a chance. Not a chance. He then reflects on what he thinks Toronto Public Health will do if he didn't suppress this most Catholic practice. Not there, not now. Nobody is going to go to communion. Zip out. Nobody is going to receive the sacraments. To try to placate them, he then took the position we know and claimed it was Toronto Public Health's strong recommendation. That is obviously not true. The Cardinal even went on to lament that Holy Communion in the hand was a terrible mistake and that should never have been permitted in the 1970s. Quite true. Cardinal Collins comes across as a tragic man, conflicted in his thinking, perhaps surrounded and advised by worldly men who wish nothing more than to go along to get along with secular humanism. Paradoxically, in retaining Holy Communion in the hand, the Cardinal proves that Toronto Public Health overstepped its authority and has no mandate from Premier Ford to illegally interfere with religious worship. Let's see. So what if Cardinal Collins said, no, sorry, we are going to continue to distribute communion. We are going to continue to sing. We are going to continue to pass out hymn books and missalettes. And I don't know, maybe we'll really step out on a limb and we'll just let people go to Mass as they used to before this madness began. What would be the reaction of the authorities in Toronto? Are the Toronto police going to seize the churches? Are they going to arrest priests? Are they going to arrest parishioners? Are they going to bolt the gates? Are they going to put a small army of policemen to stop people from coming in? Are the Ontario Provincial Police going to do the same? I don't think so. Toronto Catholic Witness says Cardinal Collins could telephone Premier Doug Ford, who is not an anti-Christian bigot. Sadly, someone dissuaded him from standing up. Did his lawyers advise him that the Toronto media would make him look bad, that they would try to shame him? Here we can only speculate, but the result was, intimidated and humiliated, he took the knee before these godless rogues and capitulated. Rather than defend Catholics' rights, he has allowed a huge step forward into surrendering our rights. Does anyone think that giving into bullies works? Cardinal Collins surrendered to the alphabet people bullies last year at the school board. It didn't work with bullies. They always come back for more. I suppose it's all very well for Cardinal Collins to be agonized about this, but he had the choice of doing the right thing, of doing the Catholic thing and standing up against atheist suppression. But the Catholic Church everywhere seems to be, how would I put it? The alacrity with which they have announced that, okay, fine, we're not going to have communion. Maybe never. You got all these people with all their germs and viruses. You can watch it. You can watch it on the internet. You can watch it on your little screen, on your little phone. It's just the same. You don't need communion. What, did we ever tell you that you needed to take it at least once a year? Oh, that law is still on the books? Well, obviously it's emergency now, so we'll just forget about that. Yeah. I see the same thing pretty well all across Canada, but it's not just in Canada as well, although I hear that the Archbishop of San Francisco seems to be taking a brave stand. The other day I talked about Australia, and let's just refresh that, okay? Yeah, COVID number of cases, Australia. And it's not that many. Okay, well, there's something like 21 million people in Australia. We have 8,586 cases and 106 deaths as of July the 6th. Country of 21 million. Again, some pandemic. This is not even a crisis, let alone a catastrophe. But I don't know. I'd always figured that the Australians were a tough bunch. Perhaps they used to be. They are certainly not now. Certainly not. This is a story from Agence France Presse. Panic buying returns as Melbourne braces for lengthy lockdown. Shoppers in Australia's second biggest city stripped supermarket shelves Wednesday as millions in Melbourne prepared for a return to virus lockdown, with warnings the new restrictions could prompt a mental health crisis. Well, it obviously has already. 5 million residents were ordered back into a 6-week lockdown beginning midnight Wednesday into Thursday, as soaring community transmission of the coronavirus brings more than 100 new cases daily. Wow, 100 new cases. So over 365 days, that would be what, like 3,600, 500? You can just see the devastation, just the absolute devastation there. Experts have warned that people everywhere will have to get used to the new normal of on and off restrictions as new clusters emerge and subside, while there are also concerns about the economic and mental health impacts the measures will bring. Well, I can see what's happening here. That, the state will decide that, too many people are buying beef and not enough people are buying onions. So, and I could give many other similar examples. So, yes, you can buy all the onions you want, but beef is going to be restricted, perhaps banned. They can do this with anything, They can shut down any place, any activity. What, because the experts say so? Just this Australia, I mean, how pitiful a reaction. Someone called Mina Hart-Durson, she's a California expat. She's now with Vice News. Vice News, yes, which is the print organ of Antifa. It was formerly with the Today Show, the New York Daily News, and ABC News. Is butter a carb? Again with the mandatory food reference. There's a story in the New York Times. Woman says she was fired because her children disrupted her work. Drisana Rios of San Diego said in a lawsuit that she lost her job with an insurance brokerage firm after her supervisor complained that her children, childcare problem, okay? And Mina, Meena, says, she quotes someone from the New York Times story, "I worry there might be a point that women might not be able to carry all this load and they start leaving the labor force." That would just be an absolutely shocking, a tragic result of COVID-19 if women got back to the habit of raising their own children. I know it sounds fantastical, but COVID-19, it is a disease of wonders that never cease. Tucker Carlson versus Tammy Duckworth. We ran into a similar thing when George W. Bush was president, that there were mothers of men who died fighting in Iraq. There was one famous one whose name escapes me. And she was constantly picketing George W. Bush. "My son died in Iraq, so the war has to stop." Well, I don't think the war should have ever begun. It's stupid and pointless and illegal under international law for people who care about that sort of thing. But the fact that someone is a veteran or the mother or father of a veteran does not give them the plenary power to decide political issues. Tammy Duckworth was shot down in a helicopter and she lost both of her legs. And but now, just a few years ago, what was it, 3 years ago, 4, 5, 6 years ago, whatever, she was raving about Mount Rushmore and how it made her feel great as American. Now Mount Rushmore is a tribute to dead traitors. Tammy Duckworth rivals Marie Hirono. Tammy Duckworth is from Thailand, and Senator Hirono is from Japan. Born there, not just of descent. She's rivaling her as the craziest, most repugnant member of the U.S. Senate. This is from the Daily Caller. Fox News host Tucker Carlson called Democratic Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth a fraud and a callous hack after she reportedly refused to appear on his show without an apology for Carlson's previous criticism of her. The senator apparently objected to a segment on Carlson's show in which the host criticized Duckworth for savaging Trump's Mount Rushmore speech as a tribute to dead traitors and suggesting it was time to listen to the conversation about taking down statues of President George Washington. "We played that for you last night. We noted how grotesque it was," Carlson said. "Only someone who hates the country would suggest ripping down monuments to its founder." Carlson noted that Duckworth did not deny his criticizing, but instead questioned our right to criticize her at all, since she was once injured while serving in the Illinois National Guard. "That's what passes for an argument in modern identity politics. They don't address the points that you make. They question your right to make them at all." Let's see. Here's some wisdom from Senator Tammy. Again, Tammy. Really? Like Tammy and the Bachelor? Like Tammy Wynette? Is that really the name for a U.S. senator? Of course, what? Bill Clinton's first press secretary was called Dee Dee. Yeah, Dee Dee. D-E-E space D-E-E. And I thought, no. Dee Dee is the bass player for the Ramones, not the press secretary for the President of the United States. But Senator Tammy tweeted on July the 6th, "My heart breaks for those who lost a loved one to gun violence this weekend as we celebrated our nation's birthday. We're long past enough is enough. It's time to act to advance meaningfully gun violence reform." Yes, because these guns have a will of their own. They just start shooting black people. You know, they somehow insinuate themselves in the hands of black people, and then they take control, of the brain and the arm and the finger, and blam, blam, blam. Gun violence. Very, very passive description. Oh, this next story is from LifeSite News, and okay. Babysitters Club Kid Show to reboot features transgender occult propaganda. I used to work for the Richmond School Board and was responsible for the cataloging of all of the books there. And I noticed that the occult was exceedingly popular in books published for elementary school students. And this was in the late 1980s, so this isn't new. Excuse me. Actually, the story is originally from Newsbusters. In the 1980s and 90s, many young girls devoured the popular book series The Babysitter's Club by Anne M. Martin. The novel's about a group of girls in a fictional Connecticut town who run a club of babysitters sold millions of copies. On July the 3rd, Netflix premiered a new series inspired by the novel. Since this is 2020, one of the tween girls in the series, Mary Ann, babysits for Bailey, a trans girl who is in fact a biological boy around preschool or kindergarten age. When the boy gets sick while she is caring for him and is rushed to the hospital, Mary Ann gives the doctors at the hospital an anguished lecture about how they ought to refer to the biological boy as a girl. Yes, one of the doctors says, "Let's take a look at the little man." Mary Ann says, "Can I please talk to you two outside? I know you guys are busy, but as you would see, if you looked at her and not her chart, Bailey is not a boy. And by treating her like one, you are completely ignoring who she is. You're making her feel insignificant and humiliated. And that's not going to help her feel good or safe or calm. So from here on out, please recognize her for who she is. And if it is at all possible, could you find me a non-blue hospital gown?" The doctor says, "Our apologies." Yeah, I bet that sort of talk goes over really well in emergency wards, because doctors really like being told off by visitors. Another modernization example is that one of the members of the Babysitters Club has a gay dad who FaceTimes with her from California with his gay male partner. The young girl is remarkably well adjusted for an adolescent whose father divorced her mother to be with another man. And no woke series would be complete without locking tween children who have only just begun puberty into a homosexual identity. So, of course, a 7th grade boy that the girls meet on the beach casually mentions a romantic crush he had on another boy. Middle school boys and girls in our brave new alphabet people world have no right to time or development for making a homosexual identity known. That is just internalized homophobia or something. The series also includes a lesbian teacher and her partner, thus 3 letters in the alphabet people alphabet are properly covered for the tween audience. Since occultism is a growing part of progressive ideology, as Newsbusters has reported, the series includes a scene of avowed witches. Wait a minute, I read Arthur Miller. There's no such thing as witches. Meeting together in their spiritual circle. There's a lot of talk about spiritual energy and other occult and New Age practices. Unlike the darker, chilling adventures of Sabrina, the Babysitters Club makes occultism light and fun for its adolescent nature, something the cool moms are doing. Lastly, the girls in the series regularly make reference to their feminist bona fides, with one girl even referring to her outfit as Ruth Bader Ginsburg chic, because that's exactly the kind of thing a 12-year-old girl would say. Popular culture is a cesspool. Shows targeted to tween girls are deliberately designed to undermine the nuclear family and Judeo-Christian values. Cultural Marxism dominates Hollywood and constantly pushes its radical cultural narrative on younger and younger populations. The series is rated TVG on Netflix and is listed under the genres Kids TV and Family Watch Together TV. Well, I guess you know the answer to that now. Don't let your kids watch Netflix. Don't let your children watch, well, any television that's being made now. There's plenty of DVDs and Blu-rays available from stuff from the old days, which is acceptable for children. There's no reason why you have to view the new stuff. You know, some of the bonuses, if you watch some of these old, Warner Brothers or MGM cartoons or Popeye the Sailor, you'll get all sorts of hilarious jokes and stereotypes, which are just not permitted anymore. But I went to Twitter and I found out that the people on Twitter, the women on Twitter, they just love this new Babysitters Club. Someone called K82 an abolition, she a butterfemme. I don't understand the way black people speak anymore. Y'all, the youth on Babysitters Club are coming through with the anti-capitalist critique. Really? Organizing direct action and escalation. Someone called Aya Furukawa says, I've just finished Babysitter Club and I've got to say, even though I worked on the show, I was moved to tears many times. The girls are wonderful actors and role models. Yeah, they just love it. And someone made the claim that the woman who wrote the novels was a lesbian. I can't certify that. Babysitters Club keeps making me cry, says Kelly Van Sant, who is a literary agent. Oh, she calls herself a witch as well. It's children's TV is making them cry. Of course, a great many millennials, in their 30s, they watch Nickelodeon shows and Disney shows like Sam and Cat and the like, and iCarly. They don't seem to think that there's anything strange about an adult watching a show which is pitched at 12-year-olds. Megafauna, or Leo Luna Turtle, says this Babysitter Club show is giving me feelings. There is a 12-year-old mixed-race girl with glasses and anxiety who likes kids and keeps apologizing to people for no reason and has a weird white dad, and I feel seen. Wow. I could ask what's happened to women, I suppose Twitter, social media is one of the things that's happened to women. You got to fit in, got to be part of that consensus, or the mean girls will get you. Once again, social media was invented to drive women insane. Let's have a final look at the chat. Aslan says, YouTube has been disappearing historical World War II videos, especially live speeches from Goebbels and Hitler. Okay. Wouldn't you want to show these things just to show? I mean, look, to people, even when I was a child, I remember when I was something like in the 3rd grade, they showed news footage of Hitler, I think, at Nuremberg rally. We all laughed. We laughed and laughed and laughed. One, we didn't understand German. And two, it was so histrionic that it just seemed comical. Okay, let's scroll down and get some final comments here. How many fake crises does it take for these sheep to wake up? Yeah, I read that one already. And again, remains to be seen. Remains to be seen. His black voice needs some work, though. I don't really have a black voice. I could work on one. I could workshop one, as they say. Laramie Hirsch says, why in the hell aren't people being tried for sedition? Why in the hell have police departments and the National Guard forgot this phrase, shoot on sight? I don't know. I remember Kent State in 1970 where the National Guard killed 4 people in Ohio, as Neil Young sang. And this was thought to be an overreaction, certainly by the media. But it had a salutary effect. There was a black college, Jackson State, where 2 people were killed. And as Tom Wolfe pointed out, this was at the end of the school year in 1970. And when school reconvened in September, suddenly there were no more revolutionaries. Jim Bowden says, KMG, but we have to defend our greatest ally, Israel. You forgot. I think everyone knows my opinion on this. I have no animus against Israel whatsoever. And I should have mentioned this yesterday with regard to this furor at a restaurant in Toronto, which is apparently anti-Zionist. The Jews, or at least organized Jewry, has been demanding Muslims, more and more Muslims. We're natural allies of the Muslims. This is the stupidest position imaginable because a great many of these newcomers would gladly slit as many Jewish throats as they could get their hands on. Furthermore, before this influx of Muslim immigration, the Jews were to a very large extent in North America seen as our Semites. And now that there's 2 groups of Semites that are shouting and threatening each other, I've been predicting this for quite some time, that it's quite possible that the majorities here in Canada, the United States, might say a pox on both your houses. We're sick of both of you. Please go home. But, yeah. I mean, America has become the economic and military guarantor of Israel. But as far as Canada goes, it's not a country that's relevant to us in any way. But again, if you read the Canadian media, you would think that Israel was located, I don't know, perhaps east of Ontario and west of New Brunswick. All right. That's it for today. And we have tomorrow Theater Thursday, and we're going to talk about a celebration of life called All That Jazz by Mel Fosse. It's a celebration of art, actually, although it's a very dark celebration of art. It's a very autobiographical film by Bob Fosse, and rather uncomfortably so if you know how Bob Fosse died. It's about dancing, and I do not like dancing. But as I mentioned before, that is the test to me, or one of the tests of a great movie that can be on a subject of which I have little interest or even detest. But I'm still moved by it. On the book club, I'm reminded of one of the great exchanges from the George Roy Hill film Slapshot, in which Paul Newman is trying to bail out the Hanson brothers from the local clink because of their outrageous activities with fans, attacking fans. To be honest, the fans attacked them first, but they'd been stirring up the pot. And so Paul Newman, great performance, is talking to a police sergeant, and he said, "You can't keep these boys in jail. They're folk heroes." And the cop says, "They're criminals." And Newman says, "Most folk heroes started as criminals." Well, the book on Friday is by Ron Hansen, and it is about one of the most famous American criminals who became a folk hero, Jesse James. The book is called The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And if you would like to support this show, my PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. And I will leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly hope that all of my dear viewers manage to forge some kind of genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.